Hello, and welcome to Unstuck by Nicole, a little perspective in your pocket to help you think differently, lead differently, and hopefully get unstuck from whatever is keeping you where you are. I don't know how you do it all. Have you ever had someone say that to you? Perhaps you smiled, perhaps you felt proud, perhaps you received it as admiration because honestly, it can feel good to be seen as the person who can handle everything. But I have started to think that when someone says, I don't know how you do it all, perhaps we should receive that feedback with curiosity and not admiration, because they may be pointing out something that we cannot yet see. For much of my life, people would regularly say things to me like this: I don't know how you work so hard. You can say no, you don't have to take it all on. And I don't know how you do this. And I remember a moment with my friend Dan telling me, you cannot keep going at this pace forever. And I genuinely had no idea what he was referring to. This was normal to me. I've always had a high functioning disposition. I traveled significantly throughout my 20s and 30s, both for pleasure and for business. And at one point, my commute was London to LA. I worked extremely hard across all sorts of time zones, maintained an equally busy social life, and carried the effects of trauma and significant chronic stress alongside it. But I was functioning. And if I'm honest, I was more than functioning. I would say I was achieving. This is one of the things I think people misunderstand about being a high functioning anxious person. I was not running around feeling anxious every minute of every day. It did not necessarily feel like anxiety to me. It felt like I was efficient, proactive, being a high achiever. I felt like I was doing something I was really good at. And let's be honest, high functioning anxious people get a lot of stuff done. We often become the reliable ones, the people who can take on more, the people others trust during the busiest periods and the most intense events. And because that way of operating can be effective, it is also rewarded. People admire your output, they rely on your capacity, you become proud of how much you can hold. So why would you question it? I certainly did not. I simply just didn't know any other way. In fact, I remember for much of my 20s, if I did not have an alarm set for the following morning and I did not have a plan or purpose to get up for, I wouldn't sleep. A lazy weekend actually meant that I did not sleep. The absence of doing the following day created conflict with what had become normal for me. How crazy was that? Even rest itself could unsettle me. But I did not recognize that as a warning. I thought it was simply who I was. And my body was exceptionally good at supporting that identity. My body is able to push through until it is given the permission to stop. And that has served me incredibly well during busy periods, intense events, long travel, and high stress. But I am becoming more and more punished for it afterwards. Once the event is over, the project is finished, or the travel has stopped, the aftermath now arrives. And that can manifest as exhaustion, a flare in symptoms, brain fog, tired, everything. I thought I was handling it, but my body has been holding it. And the moment I really began to see this come into my life was in my early 40s. And I recall when I was moving to America from the UK, my husband and I had to go through the visa process. And as part of that process, when I arrived in America, I was in theory forced to stop. I couldn't work. I couldn't travel. I couldn't even get my driving license. Everything just came to a halt. The entire structure through which I understood myself was suddenly gone. Work and purpose had always been my lifeline. So when they were temporarily taken away, I was left with a question that I'd never really needed to answer. If I am not doing, achieving, working, traveling, or being useful, what is left? The absence of intention in each day felt soul destroying to me, and it completely triggered an entire identity crisis. It also marked the beginning of what I refer to as my body breaking. Now, I do not mean that my body suddenly became broken. I mean that once all the doing stopped, my body exposed its real state. The state I had not previously seen or felt because I'd always been in motion. Symptoms surfaced, and honestly, it was chaotic, it was intense, and I could no longer remain ignorant of what my body needed. At the same time, my husband had created the safest environment for me. It was a level of safety I had never personally experienced before, and I sometimes joke that my husband broke me. But of course, he did not break me. But what he did do is he created the safety that gave my body the permission to stop pushing through. And once it stopped, I could finally see what all that capacity had been concealing. And that forced pause was really painful. But now I understand it as the wake up call that I needed. Without it, I genuinely believe I could have continued rushing around at a million miles an hour for years, perhaps even till retirement. I did not know any other way, and I did not yet understand what that pace might eventually mean for my health. The pause interrupted the pattern, and it began an education in regulation that I did not know I needed. About a year ago, almost to the day, my husband and I were preparing to relocate from California to North Carolina. And 1 month before we left, I noticed a newly opened haven in Newhall, Santa Clarita, called Rise Mindful Healing. And my curiosity got the better of me, and one day I just popped in. I've always been more spiritual and alternative in the way I think and in the practices I enjoy, so I believe I would always have been open to breath work. But I do not believe it would have been as effective for me before that forced pause. I needed the raw reality of my emotional and physical state to teach me why regulation mattered. And there is a difference between being open to a practice and being ready to receive what it offers. At Rise, I met the founders, Jen and Gracie, who are two of the kindest people I have ever met. I immediately felt at ease in their presence. Everything about the space felt intentional and calm. Their passion for supporting people was palpable, and I felt connected to them, the space, and their overall mission. There was only one challenge. In 30 days, I was actually moving to the other side of the country. So collectively, we agreed that my nervous system would benefit from immersing myself in their membership for that final month before we left. Every day that they were open, I visited and I participated in sound healing, red light therapy, yoga, and breath work. And I adored it so much that on some days I attended both a morning and evening sessions. Then I met Eva. Eva Payne led breathwork classes at Rise, and she may well be one of the most magical human beings I have ever had the pleasure of meeting. On multiple occasions during her classes, I experienced a very overwhelming emotional release. There were a lot of tears, and sometimes the release became so intense that I struggled to maintain the breathing pattern. My body was so busy releasing through the tears that for a moment I would lose control of the breath. And on those occasions, I remember the gentle touch of Eva's hands on my shoulders and her whispering, "You are safe. You can let go. I am here." Her presence and her energy gave my body permission to do exactly that. I fully let go and I did not hold back. I did not suppress the emotions and I allowed myself to release. And that safety did not come from Eva alone. It came from being in the same room of a group of people who had become a community. It came from Jen and Gracie, and it came from the other members at Rise. And I remember it came from knowing that during those emotional peaks, support was available. And when the class is finished, there was never ever rush to pull yourself together. There was always time and space, and you could remain still until you genuinely felt ready to move. And that detail mattered a lot to me because my old pattern was always to keep moving, recover quickly, get up, and to get going on the next thing. But after those sessions, I felt tired, actually completely exhausted, but immensely calm. And that calm would stay with me quietly throughout the day. And more importantly, it changed the way I treated myself for the rest of that day. I would consciously alter my pace. I reduced my commitments. I respected my mind, body, and soul and what it had just experienced. The practice did not end when the breathwork session ended. It continued in the permission I gave myself afterwards, and that was really new for me. During that month at Rise, I felt that every class was slowly moving the needle in my healing, and slowly is really, really important. Healing and regulation are not a quick fix, and I believe they may be a lifelong journey for me personally. But alongside what I was feeling, I also noticed something in my data, my HRV. Now, HRV stands for heart rate variability, and it is the tiny variation in time between each heartbeat. And it can offer an indication of how the autonomic nervous system is responding to stress and recovery. Now, generally, a higher HRV relative to your own baseline can suggest greater flexibility and capacity to move between activation and recovery. A consistently lower HRV compared to your own baseline can indicate that the body is in greater physiological or psychological load. But this is not about chasing a perfect number. But the useful part for me was actually noticing how my HRV changed relative to my own baseline during that time. Now, I measure it with an Aura ring. I love using it. I'm obsessed with it, and it's something that I rely on every day. But I remember the 2 months prior to attending Rise, my average HRV was 28 milliseconds. Then came July of 2025, and that was the month when I consistently gave my body opportunities for regulation and recovery at Rise. During that 1 month, my average HRV increased to 31 milliseconds, and it is the highest monthly average I have recorded across 15 months worth of data, and it's about 15% above my 15-month average of 27. The following month, after my 30 days at Rise, when that daily routine was no longer in place, my average dropped to 26. Now, I cannot claim that breathwork, yoga, sound healing, or red light therapy actually caused that increase because HRV is influenced by many things, including sleep, exercise, hormones, alcohol, illness, and stress. But I can say that during the month when I was most consistent about creating moments of regulation and recovery, my body recorded its highest HRV of the entire 15-month period of data. And I personally think that's worth paying attention to. I was not surprised. Rise, Eva, and all those different modalities felt like home to me. I felt safe, and my body appreciated that. The number did not tell me something I did not know, but it did offer a signal that reflected what I had actually experienced. I now think differently about what it means to support myself during demanding periods. I am still capable. I still work on very big projects. I am still someone who can manage intensity, but I am consciously working to minimize how much my body needs to push through. Sometimes that looks incredibly simple. On a very busy project, I intentionally walk slowly. That might sound very ridiculous when you consider the scale of what I am describing, but on some projects, I can be in an environment where I could literally run from one end of a event space to the other all day long, barely breathing properly. And when I do that, the fatigue afterwards hits unbearably hard. So now I intentionally slow my physical pace, walk more slowly, and breathe calmer. And I try to manage the fluctuation in my nervous system while the project is happening, not only to recover from it afterwards. The external environment may still be moving at full speed, but my body does not have to imitate every ounce of that urgency. The better I become at doing this, the less punished I am after. And this is not about becoming less ambitious or less useful or less capable. It's about becoming the authentic version of myself rather than the version who was operating for everyone around me. I previously really struggled to put myself first, but that is now changing. And while it feels strange, it's a wonderful place to be. So if you're a person who everyone looks at and says, I don't know how you do it all, I encourage you to listen to that feedback with curiosity and not admiration. People may be pointing out something to you that you cannot yet see. Their words may be the guidance you need to begin supporting your own body before it is forced to make the cost visible. You do not need to stop being capable, but you may need to become curious about what your capacity requires from you. This week, notice one thing. When everything around you feels urgent, what happens to your pace? What happens to your breathing? What signals do you automatically push through because pushing through is what you're good at? You don't need to rush to overhaul your life. Perhaps just begin by walking a little bit more slowly. Because for me, the real education was not simply learning how to breathe and slow down. It was learning the importance of feeling truly safe and allowing the release. I am still on that journey, but I am no longer ignorantly rushing through it at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Thank you for spending this time with me. Until next time, keep a little perspective in your pocket.